My boss spread rumors that I was stealing from the company to get me fired, so I proved she was actually the one stealing and got her arrested instead. Some people think having authority gives them the right to destroy innocent employees to cover up their own crimes. My boss, Sandra, thought she could frame me for theft to deflect attention from her own stealing and get me fired before I discovered her criminal activity. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting her suspicious behavior for months, and that one coordinated evidence dump would expose her as the real thief while clearing my name completely. I'm Jessica Martinez, 25, and until 2 months ago, I worked as an inventory coordinator at Pinnacle Office Solutions, a mid-sized company in Phoenix that supplies office equipment to businesses throughout Arizona. I'd been there for 2 years, consistently receiving excellent performance reviews and building a reputation as a reliable, trustworthy employee who took pride in maintaining accurate records and protecting company assets. My boss, Sandra Walsh, was a 42-year-old operations manager who'd been with the company for 8 years. When I first started working under Sandra, she seemed professional and competent, with strong organizational skills and a good understanding of our inventory systems. She trained me thoroughly and initially appeared to value my attention to detail and commitment to accuracy. But over the past year, I started noticing irregularities in our inventory that didn't make sense given our established procedures and security protocols. Expensive equipment would disappear from our warehouse without proper documentation. High-value items like laptops, tablets, and office electronics would be marked as damaged or returned to vendor in our system, but I couldn't find the corresponding paperwork or physical evidence of damage. When I brought these discrepancies to Sandra's attention, she always had explanations that seemed plausible, but didn't quite add up when I looked more closely at the details. Jessica, some of those items were emergency replacements for client issues, she'd say when I questioned missing laptops. I handled the paperwork directly with the client to expedite the process. Or she'd claim that damaged items had been disposed of through special vendor return programs that didn't require the usual documentation. The vendor handles the pickup and paperwork on their end, Sandra would explain. We just mark them as disposed in our system. At first, I accepted Sandra's explanations because she was my supervisor, and I assumed she had access to information and processes that I wasn't aware of. But as the discrepancies continued and grew larger, I became increasingly uncomfortable with the pattern. The red flags became impossible to ignore when I discovered that Sandra was the only person authorizing these unusual transactions, and that they always happened when other managers were out of the office or during shift changes when fewer people were around to witness inventory movements. I started keeping detailed records of every discrepancy I noticed, documenting the missing items, the explanations Sandra provided, and the lack of supporting paperwork for her claims. Initially, I was just trying to understand our procedures better and ensure I wasn't missing something important about our inventory management. But as my documentation grew, it became clear that Sandra was systematically stealing from the company and using her managerial authority to cover up her crimes. The breaking point came in March, when I discovered that Sandra had been falsifying inventory reports to hide the extent of missing merchandise. She'd been adjusting our system records to make it appear that items were still in stock when they'd actually been removed from the warehouse weeks earlier. When our monthly inventory audit revealed significant shortfalls, Sandra called a staff meeting to address what she called serious security concerns about our warehouse operations. We're missing over $15,000 worth of equipment from our inventory, Sandra announced to the team with fake concern. This represents a major theft problem that we need to address immediately. She went on to explain that corporate had demanded a full investigation into the missing merchandise, and that everyone would be subject to scrutiny until the thief was identified. I want everyone to understand that theft from this company is a firing offense and a criminal matter, Sandra continued. If anyone has information about missing inventory or suspicious behavior, they need to come forward immediately. The irony was overwhelming. Sandra was standing in front of our team expressing outrage about theft, while being the person responsible for stealing the missing equipment. But her performance got even more disturbing when she started making pointed comments about employees who had access to high-value inventory and opportunities to remove items without detection. We need to pay special attention to people who work with expensive equipment and have access to our storage areas during off hours, Sandra said, looking directly at me. Some employees have been staying late or coming in early, which creates opportunities for unauthorized inventory access. This was a complete fabrication. I occasionally worked overtime when we had large shipments to process, but always with proper authorization, and usually with other team members present. Sandra was creating a false narrative to make me look suspicious. Over the next week, Sandra escalated her campaign to frame me for the thefts she'd committed. She started making comments to other employees about my unusual interest in high-value inventory and my suspicious behavior around expensive equipment. She suggested that my detailed record keeping was actually evidence that I was tracking items for potential theft. Jessica asks a lot of questions about our expensive inventory, Sandra told my coworker Mike within my hearing. She's always wanting to know about laptops and tablets, asking about security procedures, taking notes about our storage systems. She was twisting my legitimate job responsibilities into evidence of criminal intent. My careful attention to inventory accuracy and security protocols was being reframed as suspicious behavior that suggested I was planning thefts. Sandra also started restricting my access to certain areas of the warehouse and excluding me from inventory-related meetings, claiming she needed to protect sensitive information during the theft investigation. Jessica, until we resolve these security issues, I need you to focus on basic administrative tasks, she told me. Corporate doesn't want anyone with questionable access patterns handling high-value inventory. This was particularly insulting because my questionable access patterns consisted entirely of doing my job thoroughly and following proper procedures. Sandra was using her own crimes as justification for treating me like a criminal. But Sandra's most damaging move was when she started spreading rumors to our corporate office that I was the prime suspect in the inventory thefts. I learned about this when Tom Rodriguez, our regional manager, called me into a meeting to discuss concerns that have been raised about your conduct. Jessica, Sandra has reported some troubling patterns in your behavior that suggest you might be involved in our inventory losses, Tom said uncomfortably. She's documented several instances where you've been in the warehouse during unusual hours and shown excessive interest in our most expensive equipment. I was shocked that Sandra had gone to corporate with fabricated evidence against me. She wasn't just trying to deflect suspicion from herself. She was actively trying to destroy my career and reputation to protect her own criminal activity. Tom, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding, I said carefully. I've been documenting inventory discrepancies for months because I was concerned about security issues. If Sandra is suggesting I'm involved in theft, she's either mistaken or deliberately misrepresenting my actions. Tom seemed uncomfortable with the conversation and suggested that I provide any documentation I had about inventory issues to help clarify the situation. That's when I realized I had the evidence needed to expose Sandra's crimes and clear my own name. I'd been documenting Sandra's suspicious activities for over a year, not knowing that I was gathering evidence of systematic theft by my own supervisor. My detailed records showed patterns of missing inventory, falsified documentation, and unauthorized equipment removal that all pointed directly to Sandra. But I needed to be strategic about how I presented this evidence. Sandra had already positioned herself as the concerned manager trying to catch a thief while painting me as the primary suspect. I needed to prove not just that Sandra was stealing, but that she was deliberately framing me to cover up her own crimes. I spent that weekend organizing all my documentation into a comprehensive report that told the complete story of Sandra's theft scheme and her attempt to frame me for her crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Detailed records of missing inventory that correlated with Sandra's work schedule. Documentation of Sandra's false explanations for missing equipment. Screenshots of system records showing how Sandra had falsified inventory reports. Timeline analysis proving that thefts occurred when Sandra was the only manager present. Examples of Sandra's contradictory statements about missing merchandise. But I also needed additional evidence to prove Sandra's guilt beyond any doubt. That's when I remembered that our warehouse had security cameras that recorded all inventory areas. If Sandra had been stealing equipment, there should be video evidence of her removing items inappropriately. I stayed late that Monday evening and accessed our security system to review footage from the dates when I'd documented missing inventory. What I found was exactly what I'd expected, and more damaging than I'd hoped. The security footage showed Sandra systematically removing expensive equipment from our warehouse during evening hours when other employees weren't present. She'd load laptops, tablets, and other high-value items into her personal vehicle, then falsify the inventory records the next day to hide the thefts. The videos clearly showed Sandra's face, the specific items she was stealing, and the dates and times of her criminal activity. She'd been running a systematic theft operation for over a year, stealing approximately $30,000 worth of company equipment. But the most damaging footage showed Sandra planting evidence to frame me for her crimes. On the same evening that she told corporate about my suspicious behavior, the security cameras captured Sandra placing some of our missing inventory in my work area, apparently planning to discover it there and use it as evidence of my guilt. Sandra wasn't just stealing from the company. She was actively trying to frame me for her crimes and destroy my career to protect herself. I copied all the relevant security footage and added it to my evidence file. Now I had everything needed to expose Sandra's crimes and prove my innocence. Detailed documentation, falsified records, video evidence, and proof of her attempt to frame me. But I wanted to make sure that Sandra faced maximum consequences for her crimes and couldn't use her management position to minimize or cover up her theft. Instead of just presenting my evidence to Tom Rodriguez, I decided to expose Sandra's crimes to multiple parties simultaneously to ensure she couldn't escape justice. On Tuesday morning, I sent my complete evidence package to 5 different recipients. Tom Rodriguez, our regional manager. Corporate headquarters security department. The company's legal department. Local police fraud investigators. Sandra's husband, who worked at a different company but deserved to know his wife was a criminal. I wanted to make sure that Sandra's crimes were exposed to everyone who needed to know the truth, and that she couldn't use her position or relationships to avoid consequences. The response was immediate and devastating for Sandra. Tom Rodriguez called me within an hour of receiving my evidence package, apologizing profusely for believing Sandra's false accusations, and praising the thoroughness of my documentation. Jessica, this evidence clearly shows that Sandra has been systematically stealing from our company and trying to frame you for her crimes, he said. We're immediately suspending Sandra pending a full investigation, and we're referring this case to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. Corporate security arrived at our office that afternoon to seize Sandra's computer, search her office, and secure any additional evidence of her theft. They also interviewed other employees to determine if anyone else had been victimized by Sandra's false accusations. The police investigation moved quickly because the evidence I'd provided gave them a clear roadmap to Sandra's criminal activity. The security footage was particularly damaging because it showed Sandra in the act of stealing company property on multiple occasions. But the investigation also revealed that Sandra's crimes were even more extensive than I'd documented. Police discovered that Sandra had been selling stolen company equipment online through multiple accounts on eBay and Facebook Marketplace. She'd stolen over $50,000 worth of merchandise over 18 months, using her management position to cover up the thefts. Sandra had also been manipulating employee schedules and work assignments to create opportunities for theft, while ensuring that honest employees like me would be present during inventory audits to potentially take blame for missing merchandise. The criminal charges against Sandra were comprehensive: grand theft, embezzlement, fraud, computer crimes for falsifying records, and filing false police reports for trying to frame me for her crimes. But Sandra's arrest was just the beginning of her downfall. The evidence I'd sent to her husband led to their immediate separation and divorce proceedings. He was horrified to learn that his wife was not only a criminal, but had been trying to frame an innocent employee for her own crimes. Sandra's reputation in our industry was destroyed when news of her arrest spread through our professional network. She'd been respected as a competent manager, but now everyone knew she was a thief who'd betrayed her company's trust and tried to destroy an innocent employee's career. The criminal case resulted in Sandra pleading guilty to all charges to avoid a longer sentence at trial. She was sentenced to 3 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution for all the equipment she'd stolen. But the civil consequences were equally devastating for Sandra. She was fired immediately and lost all her employment benefits. The company sued her for damages beyond just the stolen merchandise, including the costs of the investigation, legal fees, and damage to the company's reputation. Sandra also faced a wrongful termination lawsuit that I filed with my attorney for her attempt to frame me and destroy my career. The settlement from that case helped compensate me for the stress and damage to my reputation from her false accusations. Most satisfyingly, Sandra's attempt to frame me completely backfired and actually led to me being promoted to her former position as operations manager. Corporate was so impressed with my detective work in exposing Sandra's crimes and protecting the company's assets that they offered me Sandra's job with a significant raise and expanded responsibilities. Jessica, your attention to detail and commitment to protecting company assets saved us from much larger losses, Tom Rodriguez told me. We want employees like you in leadership positions where you can help prevent this kind of theft in the future. I accepted the promotion and implemented new security procedures to prevent future theft and ensure that no other employees could be falsely accused of crimes they didn't commit. Some people have suggested that I went too far by sending evidence to Sandra's husband instead of just focusing on the criminal and employment aspects of her crimes. But Sandra had tried to destroy my career and reputation to cover up her own criminal activity. She'd spread lies about me to corporate management and tried to frame me for thefts that could have resulted in my arrest and prosecution. Sandra's husband deserved to know that he was married to someone who was not only a criminal, but was actively trying to destroy innocent people's lives to protect herself. The theft from the company was bad enough, but trying to frame me for her crimes was a level of cruelty that went beyond simple greed. By exposing Sandra's crimes to everyone who needed to know the truth, I ensured that she faced full consequences for her actions and couldn't use her position or relationships to minimize or escape justice. Sandra learned that management positions come with responsibilities, not just opportunities to steal from your employer and abuse your subordinates. She also learned that some employees are too smart and too thorough to be successfully framed for crimes they didn't commit. The woman who thought she could steal $50,000 worth of equipment and frame me for her crimes ended up with 3 years in prison and a destroyed reputation. Meanwhile, I'm thriving in my new management role and have implemented security procedures that will protect both company assets and innocent employees from future theft and false accusations. Sandra's theft scheme lasted 18 months. Her prison sentence will last 3 years, and her criminal record will last forever. I think the company got the better deal when they traded a criminal manager for an honest one. Sometimes the best way to deal with a corrupt boss is to gather evidence, document everything, and make sure the truth comes out all at once to everyone who matters. Sandra got exactly what she deserved. Nothing but consequences. And I got something better. Justice, vindication, and a promotion to the position she lost through her own criminal behavior. The employee she tried to frame became the manager who replaced her. That's what I call perfect justice.